Over to Joe, who is a content engineer and an interpreter of the Bible. Both, I think, require a lot of art.
Yes, I will, I guess, disclose I am not an artist. My mother is quite a heavyweight, so she's one of the big sellers of, as artists go here in Victoria. So I always get asked, did I follow in her footsteps? And I said, no, the genes skipped this generation. They just skipped right over me. Um, but that said, and then there's some truth to that because all of my 4 kids are actually quite good artists and in different media. So there may be something to that theory. Um, I was thinking, I wanted to touch on a philosopher who is near and dear to my heart these days, guy named Hans Georg Gadamer. And he's interesting in part because he lived for 102 years and was teaching almost to the day he died, which is amazing. But he basically lived the entire span of the 20th century. And he is, I think his star continues to grow and rise in the world of philosophy. And so he was a phenomenologist and a hermeneutist, like looking at the art basically of interpretation. What's interesting, he's got a great big book, which I didn't bring in because it's kind of terrifying. This huge tome called Truth and Method, which you'd think would be about the most horrible thing to bring up in the discussion of art. In fact, his entire theory of truth starts with art. And he said that art is actually the perfect example of what truth really is. And in one of his quotes is that art is a mode of truth and that art is a happening. And I think what we've heard from everybody so far is sort of bouncing back and forth between the creator and the need to express and the viewer or listener or reader, the person who's and one of the things that Gadamer, I think, brings out delightfully is that art actually happens as an event when these two perspectives come together. And one of his phrases is fusion of horizons. So just as we heard, art can be almost like a summation, which I think is something that you touched on, Pauline, a summation of somebody's experience, their worldview. But then the reader has the same thing and brings their view. And that's why, for example, seeing Michelangelo over the centuries or even a cave piece of cave art over the millennia, we see, it was created in a very specific world. But then we come at it with eyes from a totally different world. And by bringing those horizons together, we actually really get close to human truth. So it's a little bit of a digression into metaphysics and ontology and epistemology, but I find it fascinating that for Gadamer, art is the penultimate expression of how we as humans know. And so I'll pause there, but I'll come back later.